Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Chair thanks the gentleman, and now recognize Ms. Tomlinson, 5 minutes for her summary.
Thank you. Chairman Pitts and members of the committee, thank you very much for the opportunity to testify today. Really appreciate your focus on this issue. The perspective that I'm about to share comes from a variety of experiences over the past 25 years. My work at the Office of Management and Budget on the Medicaid program as a researcher and a consultant to long-term care providers, and most recently serving as a facilitator between the economic modeling work done at the Urban Institute in Milliman and several of the very brave groups working on long-term care financing reform. I also write a blog for family caregivers. We have a very serious and significant financing gap between the services and supports that people need and the funds available to pay for them. I'm going to make just 3 points that I hope will frame today's discussion and shape the work of this committee. First, as we've heard already, having a high need for long-term care in old age is not an inevitable part of old age. And what I mean by high level of long-term care need is when you get to the point that you need help with 2 or more activities, basic activities of daily living, like bathing, eating, or dressing, or if you're living with a severe cognitive impairment. And what we are learning from the recent work done by the Urban Institute in Milliman is that there is a huge variation in whether and the degree to which individuals will actually experience this high level of long-term care need in old age. The researchers project that over the older adult population, there's a roughly 50% chance that if you live to age 65, that at some point over the rest of your old age, you will experience that high level of need for long-term care. Now, there's also a smaller, a 15% chance that a person will live with that level of need for 5 or more years. Just imagine living with 2 or more activities, daily living limitations for 5 or more years. These situations are incredibly expensive. If you're among the top 15% of spenders, the Urban Institute projects that your care will cost at least $250,000 over your lifetime. The bottom line is that the risk here is large and it is uncertain. So the second point I want to make is the way we finance these costs, as we've all heard, is inadequate to the need. Individuals and families face huge financial risks. Generally, what the Urban Institute research is telling us is that on average, over half of lifetime costs are actually financed through individuals' income and savings through out-of-pocket spending. But when and if these resources run out, Medicaid plays a very important role. It finances about 1/3 of lifetime costs on average and makes the biggest contribution for people who need care for very long periods of time. The reliance on individual resources in Medicaid has created huge gaps in the system. We've already talked about this, but we rely very heavily on unpaid family caregiving. And this is in part because this is often the only option that families feel like they have. But I want to talk about another gap that we see, which is that we often simply just fail to meet needs. In a recent survey, about 1/3 of individuals with long-term care needs reported serious consequences from going without needed services. For example, individuals who have difficulty preparing their own food or difficulty eating and can't get help with that often go without eating. And this unmet need gets addressed in the emergency room and the hospital, which is, of course, where Medicare pays. So my third point is that the risk of needing long-term care is one that is well suited for insurance, but shifting all or even a part of our financing to insurance will be very challenging. So I'm the Debbie Downer here. So even when we estimate a twofold increase in voluntary participation in long-term care insurance, we still don't see it moving the needle that much on how much we spend on Medicaid and how much out-of-pocket contributions are made. So I want to be careful here and say that this doesn't mean it wouldn't be helpful to increase insurance participation under a voluntary approach. It would. It wouldn't dramatically change the role of Medicaid or out-of-pocket spending. To do that, we need everyone to participate. But even when we assume that everyone is covered, it's still hard because that new coverage soaks up so much of the unmet need that it increases overall spending almost as much as it offsets other sources of payment. So in grappling with these tough issues, where the groups I've worked with have landed, as you've heard, is that some sort of private market and public insurance partnership solution is needed, and that the appropriate role of public insurance is to cover that catastrophic risk, that 5 years, or 4 years, or 3 years, but the part that is the most expensive for individuals. But that is only going to work. That catastrophic risk coverage will only work as long as we can stimulate the private market and reform Medicaid to better cover the earlier risk. But everyone has more work to do. We have to develop details. We still have to work on financing strategies, but we have to move forward no matter how challenging it might be because our stopgap patchwork system has serious implications for future economic productivity, public program spending, and for the functioning of the American family. Thank you.